Arkham Survival Multiplayer, The Scarlet King. To understand the Scarlet King, we must return to a time before time itself. Long before any gods existed, and long before any mortals existed, there existed two things, and two things only. The first was a being called the Architect, a creator, a creative, not person, but entity that would go on to form our universe as we know it. And, of course, there was the antithesis to the Architect, the Scarlet King, a creature of pure nothingness. Very little is known about the Scarlet King. In fact, in this detailed account, these are simply theories proposed by scholars and researchers. We do not know for sure whether any of this information is accurate, or if the Scarlet King even exists. But to understand the story, we must return to a time before our understanding of the universe. Long ago, as I mentioned before time itself existed, the Scarlet King and the Architect, existed in a constant struggle. Anything the Architect would create, the Scarlet King would in turn destroy. And so, the Architect needed to come up with something. The Architect, you see, was the creator before creators. Our sort of theoretical parent. Parent of the universe would be the way to put it. For the Architect, using magic beyond comprehension, was able to spur not just life, but existence itself into creation. And while the Architect controlled the ability to create existence, the Scarlet King controlled the power of non-existence, existing in between the folds of reality. For you see, within the planes of reality, there exist small gaps. Think of the universe as layers. Up top you have Elysium, aka Heaven, then the Feywilds, Mechanus, the mortal realm, then hell, the abyss, all the other planes, and all of them exist in between. But if planes were to intersect and touch, it would be catastrophic. World-ending, in fact. The planes were not meant to touch, and that's why when we see planar anomalies, they usually don't end well. And so, there exists in between each plane of existence a small gap of nothingness. To the best of our knowledge, nothing exists there. At least, that's what we thought. For we discovered, well, we didn't, but the gods discovered something quite concerning hidden in those gaps of reality. In those gaps was a vast empire, ruled by the Scarlet King, the seat of which was the sunken city of Relay. This city was massive, home to billions of creatures, and at the center of the city was the Scarlet King's palace. Well, not technically the Scarlet King's. You see, the Scarlet King exists beyond our understanding of existence. He's not necessarily corporeal. He can take on a corporeal form, but his original form cannot be comprehended by mortal eyes. And so, in his place stood Cthulhu. He served as sort of the regent king of Relay, while the Scarlet King was the one pulling the strings behind the Empire. Now, when the gods discovered this, it freaked them out, to say the least. I mean, discovering a whole civilization hidden away in gaps of nothingness is quite a shock to a god that thinks they understand how the universe works. I mean, they are to the best of their knowledge, the creators. And so, upon seeing this, the gods began to panic. Now, keep in mind, this was long before our current pantheon. This is what we now call the old gods, the ones who ended up corrupting Arkham, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But these gods, in their desperation, reached out to the architect. And they came across the architect and said, "Hey, listen, we need your help." The architect, upon hearing this, was not surprised, for they knew it was happening, but concerned, for the scope of the Scarlet King's empire had greatly expanded since the last time the architect and the Scarlet King had fought, because keep in mind, their battle has been going on since before time. It's one of the constants of the cycle of life and rebirth, is the Scarlet King versus the architect. But there are time periods, usually in between creations of universes and the ultimate inevitable destruction of said universes, where the Scarlet King and the architect will not battle, and will instead regroup, the Scarlet King expanding his empire, and the architect often either saving a universe or creating a new one. And so, upon seeing how vast the Scarlet King's empire was, the architect grew nervous. And thus they decided to make something. They crafted 5 books. And these books are sentient, at least. That's what we think. That's what we've been led to believe, is that they are sentient and can communicate with humans and are capable of thought. Now, these books are supposedly tomes that hold the architect's or not information, but knowledge, and that knowledge holds the key to defeating and hopefully destroying the Scarlet King. Why the architect made these, we have no idea. Some scholars, including myself, theorize that it was because the architect, while being a creator, could not interact with our world the way we do. They could not directly interfere, and so they could only give us the means to defeat the Scarlet King. However, this theory begins to fall apart when the architect did what they did next. They contacted the old gods. Upon contacting these old gods, or as they were known at the time, the original gods, they asked for a favor. Now, the original gods, while scared of the Scarlet King, weren't too keen on helping the architect either. You see, they believed themselves to be the true creators, the ones who would truly be the guiding force for the universe, and the architect's existence threatened them. However, they had little choice. And so, the old gods elected 7 gods to assist the architect. The name of these gods, and you'll want to take note of these, are Yegorl, Cathraxi, Azamarith, Onyx, Zangor, Tamikathrax, and Darimothris, Destroyer of Worlds. These 7 old gods were tasked with forging chains that would be able to bind the Scarlet King to his realm of non-existence. Now, the issue with that is completing these chains was no small task. These chains needed to be strong enough to bind a creature that
for all intents and purposes, was omnipotent and able to break out of anything, a being beyond understanding itself. And so, what they did is something that is frowned upon by a lot of the newer gods. They went out into the universe and found planets. Now, Arkham was the first planet created by the gods, you see. And at this time, Arkham didn't exist. This was long before the creation of Arkham. However, planets still existed, planets that had not been created by the gods, planets that had been formed out of pure, primal, chaotic energies. These planets, while inhabited by life, had a different form of life. Beings formed rather than being formed from thought and creation, they were formed from pure primal energy. They took the forms of almost orbs of energy, these glowing balls that could morph into different forms, humanoid or otherwise. And these 7 old gods, in order to fashion these chains, found 7 of these worlds and destroyed them, harnessing the chaotic energy that was used to create said worlds and their inhabitants, and forging them into chains. These chains were later applied to the Scarlet King in order to bind him to his, essentially his prison. Now, that seems all well and good, but there's more to this story. After the Scarlet King had been bound to his immortal prison, we all know that the old gods went mad. Now, many scholars theorize that the descent into madness that made the old gods void creatures, as we know them today, was the Scarlet King. For while he was not able to directly interfere with the universe within his prison of nothing, he was able to influence the mind of these old gods, manipulating them, not as the Scarlet King, but as whispers of the void, driving them to madness, and ultimately, his plan worked. The gods went insane and were transformed into creatures of eldritch origin. And so, to combat this, upon seeing this, the architect created new gods. The gods we know, the Pantheon, Primus, all the gods that formed Arkham. And they went on to create Arkham. Now, the Scarlet King was none too happy about this, for, as we all know, the architect is his worst enemy. And so, he decided to try something. He began corrupting lesser gods, and using his influence on these lesser gods as well as his influence on the old gods, he sent them to enact the cataclysm, as we know it. Now, keep in mind, this is all just a theory as to what drove the old gods insane. There are many different theories, but this is the one I will be detailing in this account. So, the Scarlet King is within his prison, corrupting the gods, and still having some sort of influence on our world, ultimately causing the cataclysm. But where does that leave us today? Well, we don't really know. It is rumored that the architect took the 5 tomes that they had created, also known as the Sacred Five, and they were supposedly spread across the world of Arkham. Now, whether this is true or not, we don't know. We found no evidence of these, but ancient accounts from rulers long forgotten have shown mentions of speaking books that align with the description of the Sacred Five, the 5 tomes created by the architect that supposedly hold the knowledge of how to defeat the Scarlet King. And on top of that, the Scarlet King has been staging many proxy wars, to say the least. Many believe Ala Cabal was a result of the Scarlet King's meddling. Many believe that the Mana Bomb and the artifact that created the Mana Bomb, which eventually caused the Sundering, the formation of the new supercontinent of Arkham, there's many that believe that the Scarlet King was behind that, whispering in the ears of susceptible mortals, and immortals as well. Once again, we know very little. We cannot be certain. But either way, there's evidence that the Scarlet King is regaining some of his lost power. And if we cannot find the books that the architect details, then all hope is lost, essentially. For there is something that the Scarlet King can do that I have not brought up yet. And the reason behind that is because it scares me. It scares me to death. The Scarlet King, once he gains his full power, can erase all of existence itself. Not just a world, not just a universe, the entire multiscape. Gone in an instant. And so it becomes less of an issue of defeating the Scarlet King once he's gained his full power, for that's quite simply just impossible. It's about stopping the Scarlet King from coming back. And so, many organizations, such as the Adventurers League, the Academy Arcanus, even the Order of the Golden Dragon, has supposedly been searching for the Sacred Five, trying to find any remnants of something that could possibly stop the Scarlet King. But if we can't find these tomes or get into contact with the architect, then, well, it's safe to say Arkham and the rest of the multiscape will be destroyed. And with that, all life will cease to exist forever. Now, this could all be false. The Scarlet King could not exist at all. It's possible, but I personally believe in his existence. And the reason behind that is because I've heard his whispers. Now, throughout this account, I have yet to mention my name. And that is because, well, part of me doesn't want to admit that I know these things. My name... It's hard for me to say this because I know that if I say it, I'm just giving myself to the Scarlet King even more. But I refuse to not be remembered. I refuse to be forgotten. And I refuse to be a nameless victim of the Scarlet King's wrath. My name is Alexander Tinkspark. I'm a descendant of Tullius Tinkspark, creator of the Academy Arcanus. And I'm a researcher. I worked with Professor Marisha Andelbaum in writing the Encyclopedia Demonica. The encyclopedia that contains the article on the Scarlet King that is most widely accepted. Now, what does this mean for me? I've heard his whispers. I've heard his corruption coming. All I see when I sleep is the infinite eyes of the Scarlet King. I can tell his influence is taking its toll on me. I'm losing sleep. I find myself drifting into thoughts of destruction, of the world ending, and thoughts of piercing red eyes staring at me from the void. And thus, I know my time is limited on this plane, for I'd much rather end my own life before being turned into a subject of the Scarlet King, before being used and corrupted. And so the reason I'm recording this audio log via sending magic is because this is how I will say goodbye. This is my last couple of thoughts that will grace this plane. The Scarlet King comes, and with him, fire, death, and destruction. There's little we can do, and so I beg, whoever is listening to this, please, find the Sacred Five and stop the Scarlet King. Prevent him from returning to his full power, for if he does, Arkham and all other life across the multiscape will cease to exist, and there will be nothing we can do about it. Thank you for listening to this audio log. I don't know what to say. I've seen images of the Scarlet King, things that I wish I'd never seen, dreams, visions, all part of his all-consuming madness. And so I have attached a drawing I've done of the Scarlet King. I've attached it below, so that perhaps whoever finds this can possibly recognize him if they were to ever encounter him. And I hope whoever does find this can use this information in ways that I was unable to. I have many regrets in my life. I have many things I wanted to do, places I wanted to see, adventures I wanted to go on. But I know that those dreams of mine will never be accomplished. For the Scarlet King knows all. His burning eyes see all, and we cannot escape. To Dr. Marisha Andelbaum, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I never got to tell you how I truly feel about you. I'm sorry that you will most likely suffer the same fate I have. But if you don't, I want you to know that you are one of the brightest, most beautiful minds I've ever seen. And thus, it pains me to say that I will not be able to see you again. However, I hope that we can reunite in the next life. I love you, Dr. Marisha Andelbaum. I hope you know that. And to all the rest of the people of Arkham, to all the heroes, to all the normal folk, to all the rulers who would rather brush this information off as hysterics or pure myth, let this be a warning. The Scarlet King cometh, and with him he brings the end of all existence. If you cannot stop him, then no one will. This is Dr. Alexander Tinkspark signing off for the last time. May the world finally find peace, and may the heroes of Arkham protect what remains of our world. Goodbye.